He was born during the Great Patriotic War on March 23, 1943. He spent his entire childhood in hospitals since his mother was a nurse and he did not remember his father. He himself, however, was not ill. In any case, this is the conclusion that the medical commission assembled during the investigation of the case of one of the bloodiest maniacs in the USSR will come to. After the war, the Sukletin family settled in Kazan. The boy studied at school, did not stand out with any unique knowledge, was interrupted from 2 to 3. The Kazan media wrote shortly after his detention. In adolescence, he began to drink heavily, and after that he became inadequate. As reported, after another such drunkenness, at the age of 17, the boy was detained for rape. On a February night, he attacked a girl right on the street, hit her on the head with a heavy, blunt object, as the security forces wrote in the protocols. Then he knocked him down in the snow and planned to abuse him. As chance intervened, 2 young men decided to cut the road through a remote courtyard. What was going on in the drunken head of a 17-year-old teenager is unknown, but instead of running away, he asked them to get out. Sukletin was taken to the police. The girl soon came to her senses and told how everything was. At the trial, he sobbed, like his mother, a pensioner for a long time. Back in 1960, he was threatened with execution for rape, but the judges handed down an extremely lenient sentence, only 2 years in prison. He was sent to an educational and labor colony for minors. The article, according to which the boy got to places not so remote, to put it mildly, is considered dishonorable. Sukletin was bullied in full, starting from clogging his nose with toothpaste, ending with beatings. In the early 1960s, he left the colony, but less than 2 years later, he returned back. One day, he met 2 friends. They wanted a drink, but no one had any money. Then Sukletin remembered that an old lady lives nearby, to whom his acquaintance once repaired a tile. Grandma had no doubts about opening the door, or not, when all 3 introduced themselves as Gorgaz. Everything is logical, recently repaired, checked. The woman was hit on the head with something heavy, tied up and began to rummage around the apartment. On one of the shelves, hidden from prying eyes, lay 80 rubles. The old lady recovered after some time. The attackers ran away so urgently that they didn't even close the door. A neighbor looked in on the pensioner. When the victim was brought to her senses, she went to the police. All the criminals were detained a few hours later. As it turned out, they were very close to the old woman's apartment. This time, the court handed Sukletin almost the maximum term possible for such a crime, 12 years in a penal colony. In the colony, Sukletin, as Batayev wrote, quickly began to cooperate with law enforcement officers, told the police everything he knew about every emergency. He often found himself in the hospital at the colony. Apparently, his cellmates still guessed about his cooperation with the authorities. So 12 years have passed. After his release in 1976, Sukletin initially came to his native Kazan, but soon after that he moved to the village of Vasilevo, the only place where he was able to get a job as a watchman in the local garden association, Voskod. However, he was soon fired from there for absenteeism. Then Sukletin got a job in another partnership where a friend brought him. Now it was necessary to solve the issue of personal life. Back in the colony, Sukletin read books. After being released, he conquered girls with his ability to choose words, well read. This was later recalled by his cohabitant, Madina Shakirova, 23-year-old beauty. Madina Shakirova only laughed when a 36-year-old former convict working as a watchman wanted to meet her. She came from a working-class family. Mother and father have been at the factory all their lives. She barely graduated from school herself, lived in Uzbekistan for a while, worked at a local garment factory where relatives helped her get a job. Then she returned home to Kazan, worked first as an assistant turner, then as a turner at the factory. A thin, huge-eyed, dark-skinned girl literally fell in love with young people at first sight. But she didn't like anyone. This hard worker, there's nothing to talk about. This ugly one, and that one, so in general. Therefore, how it turned out that the guard began to live with her soon after meeting her remained a mystery for the girl herself. A few years later, she said that she was hypnotized. What can I buy with the salary of a security guard in a garden association? Yes, practically nothing, but for a daily drink, as Sukletin wanted, it certainly won't be enough. Then he decided to act by the proven method, robbery. He sent a girl with some insignificant sum to Kazan and told her to wait until the last train to Vasiliev left.
After persuading one of the taxi drivers to take her for the money, promising to pay for everything at home. An important clarification: Dina had to look great, put on makeup, do her hair, dress up. The driver had to complain about her husband, Herod, who left for women again. And then make the taxi driver want to stay the night. And then it's a matter of technique, Sukletin said, smiling. The girl was already sitting at home with the taxi driver when the husband, Sukletin, and a friend broke in and began to beat the driver. "As much money as there is, I will give it all. Just let me go," the young man pleaded. They took all the money from him, after which he brought about 200 rubles more. In November 1979, Sukletin came to their little lopsided house with a girl, 22-year-old Ekaterina Osetrova. Plump, pretty, funny. "This is my sister," the guard introduced her to his friend. Later in court, Shakirova could not explain why she reacted so calmly when he brought the girls into the house and how it happened that she became an accomplice. The company was sitting and drinking in the kitchen when the owner left. He returned, as Batayev writes, with a hammer with which he hit Katya on the head from behind. After that, he tied his victim's hands with a clothesline and cut his throat. Blood dripped into the trough brought by his wife. After that, Sukletin began to cut the skin and cut out organs from the deceased. All this time Shakirova was standing by, neither alive nor dead. "Che got up, cook your heart and tongue go," he yelled at her. But when he heard the refusal, he went to show it himself. He made the girl taste the heart of the murdered woman and ate the rest himself. After that, the girl continued to be dismembered. The meat was separated, the bones were chopped. The head, hands, and feet were thrown out nearby. The blood was poured out behind the house. Sukletin left part of the meat at home for food. I gave something to the dogs. After that, they cleaned the house, leaving, it seems, no trace. After that, he asked Medina to cook either borscht or dumplings, then fry the potatoes with meat. The girl tried to refuse, but Sukletin began to threaten with murder and the fact that Shakirova would be in pieces in the freezer. She drank a lot and, unlike Shakirova, blackmailed her lover. The girl demanded money for a drink and, in case of refusal, threatened to hand him over to the police. It all started in the summer of 1985. Lydia Fedorova, a resident of the village at 774 kilometers, disappeared. And although the woman led an antisocial lifestyle, her long absence raised questions. 2 weeks before this story thundered, Operative Misha Nechayev and I visited Sukletin. We had a cup of tea, talked to him. They say, "Have you seen Lida?" He calmly replied, "No." Retired Major Anatoly Vladimirov told Zelenodolskaya Pravda. After that, the seagull Sukletin went on a binge. Almost the only comrade, Gennady Uglov, came to him then. "We urgently need to kill Medina. She knows too much." And Lidka. Yes, there it is, a head in a saucepan. "Do you want some meat?" "She's already pickled." Uglov left the house and rushed to the police. Of course, no one believed him there. "Well, what kind of head? What kind of dismemberment? You also tell me that he raped children." "Oh, and that was it." "Comrade, you are in a madhouse." However, the police still decided to check this version. The first thing that was felt in the house was the smell of a corpse. The summer was very hot, and the meat that was on the street simply decomposed. Soon, forensic expert Alexander Fedyunov found a piece of human skin in the vicinity of the guard's house. Within the next few days, Law enforcement officers will find 4 bags with human remains. The criminal case was opened on June 4, 1985. Sukletin did not hide that he had killed Fedorova. Gradually, though at first reluctantly, he told about the others. He demonstrated the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, as soon as they asked him to show what he was cutting up the victims with. Sukletin was immediately taken to jail. Meanwhile, the locals began to remember how many times the maniac came with all sorts of acquaintances. There were about 20 people. The prosecution later proved 7 episodes of murder and dismemberment. Since the maniac always had a lot of meat, he said that he had agreed with the meat processing plant. He sold it to his neighbors, both tenderloin and cutlets made by Medina, then Lida, and much more. Shakirova was detained a few hours later. At first she tried to deny it, but after learning that her common-law husband confessed everything, she wrote her testimony on almost 100 sheets. "I didn't kill anyone myself. She cut meat, cooked food from the dead. We appropriated some of the things of the dead: coat, skirt, jacket, shoes, felt boots. I took only good things. We burned the bad ones," an excerpt from her testimony. The girl wrote that Sukletin can eat his own mother, that he is a real devil, and so on, so on, so on. She said that she was afraid of a maniac, or rather to be eaten. It's better to be shot. He mixed threats with stories about the girls being chosen, with stories about a certain initiation into something mysterious. After Lydia's brutal murder was proved, it became clear that capital punishment could not be avoided. The maximum that can be done is to postpone it. Then Sukletin began to make sensational confessions one by one. Moreover, the murders concerned not only Tatarstan, but also many other republics. According to the cannibal's calculation, the check will take a long time, and new confessions will only delay the execution. However, the investigators responded negatively to requests made throughout the Union, whether there were particularly brutal murders outside the village. As a result of painstaking work, it became obvious that these statements were false. They wrote later in the materials of his case. Meanwhile, Shakirova confessed to complicity in 5 murders. Sukletin tried to pretend to be crazy, talked about memory lapses, but all the examinations found him healthy, with a coherent speech, maybe a little retarded. He admitted more than once that he felt no pity for the dead. "I only regretted that I knew that the most severe punishment could not be avoided." Sukletin was sentenced to an exceptional measure of punishment. On July 29, 1987, the sentence was carried out. Before the execution, the Zelenodolsk ogre made women's shoes out of bread and gave them as a gift to the investigator of the prosecutor's office, with a photo which he accompanied with the inscription, "I hope that from the last ogre of Tatarstan." For Medina, the prosecution also asked for the highest measure, but the lawyer insisted that she didn't kill anyone. As a result, 15 years of imprisonment in a high-security colony. She has already been released and even came to her native Vasilyevo. However, it is not known for certain where she is now and whether she is alive.